Hey friend, welcome back or welcome here to the Being Aloud podcast. I am your host, Biba Shea, and today's episode is the wake-up call we have probably all needed at one point in our lives or another. For those of you who don't already know, I have had my fair share of relationships and failed relationships and a marriage and a divorce. So suffice it to say that I have just a bit of experience when it comes to the love, or oftentimes lack thereof, area of life. I had a conversation with one of my best friends last week. We were reminiscing over memories from years ago when we were on a scuba diving trip. I told him, I remember fighting with my boyfriend so much on the phone on that trip, and we'd scream at each other before I left my room to meet with you guys, and I'd need to put my smile on so that no one would know. That boyfriend ended up being my husband, who ended up being my ex-husband. My friend looked at me and said, "So you guys were fighting that much that early on, and you still got married? I don't understand. How does a person marry someone they fight so much with?" I thought his question made so much sense. Whenever I saw or see my friends fighting certain fights with their significant others before they get married, I too get all kinds of feelings that they maybe should not pursue marriage, or at least that they should seek professional help. But the truth is that it's never that simple when you're right in the middle of it, right? For today's episode, I want to tell you what I believe are signs that you should let go of the relationship you're in and move on. Because sometimes what we need is for someone outside the relationship to say something that rings a bell so that we can finally see that something does need to change. It's not easy, but that is precisely why we need to have today's conversation. Let's get started. Hey friend, welcome back or welcome here to the Being Aloud podcast. من فترة كده كنت عملت Q&A على انستغرام. سألتكم what kind of content or what kind of topics you would like us to cover here on the Being Aloud podcast. وكتير قوي منكم كذا حد بعتوا قلتوا بالظبط ان انتوا محتاجين episode نتكلم فيها عن ازاي نعرف انه جه الوقت ان احنا move away, ان احنا walk away from a certain relationship that has proven toxic or that no longer serves us ونمشي. And this is a huge one, وده conversation معين أنا كان نفسي قوي إن أنا أسمعه وأبقى جزء منه. Before I left my marriage, in fact before I even entered my marriage, كان نفسي يعني أبقى واعية بالtopic اللي احنا هنتكلم عليه النهاردة. ولأنه الواقع هو بتاع إنه إحنا لما بنكون في نص العلاقة obviously we are biased, you know, obviously في حاجة معينة عم يعنينا ساعات, وطبعا ده بدرجات وناس يعني they suffer with this more than other people وكده. بس in general when people are in the middle of a relationship صعب قوي عليهم إن هم يلاحظوا كل حاجة, لأن the proof is إن أنا عشت علاقة. أنا كنت مع my ex-husband before we got married. احنا كنا مع بعض لمدة 3 سنين, وفي ال3 سنين دول أنا كنت عارفة إن أنا مش مبسوطة. أكن في عقلي الباطن كنت عارفة إن أنا مش مبسوطة أو إنه في red flags معينة, بس كان صعب عليا قوي إن أنا أقرر إنه أوكي red flags دي كفاية إن أنا أخد الخطوة بتاعت إن أنا أمشي, مع إن ده كان القرار اللي هيبقى صح. بس I was so close to the situation, وكان عندي مشاعر حب تجاه الشخص. فمشاعر الحب دي دايما بتلخبط قوي الموضوع وبتخلي انه القرار الصح اللي هو بالعقل يبقى أصعب وأصعب. I remember ان انا while I was going through the divorce يعني قعدت مع واحد من اكتر اصحابي في الحياة يعني, وكنا مع بعض في العربية, ومش هنسى conversation دي. قال لي بوبا أنا بس عايزك توعديني ان في العلاقة الجاية بتاعتك انتي هتشغلي مخك, هتخلي مخك يلعب دور اكبر في القرار من ما هو كان بياخد قبل كده. قعد يشرح لي انه مهمة قوي قوي ان القلب يبقى شغال، وانه مشاعرنا تبقى برضو بتعمل قرار، لان obviously احنا لما بناخد قرار ان احنا نبقى في علاقة romantic relationship, obviously the heart plays a huge role في الموضوع ده. بس قال لي من فضلك زودي البرسنتج بتاع قد ايه مخك بيشتغل برضو، لان مهم قوي ان المخ يبقى balanced مع القلب في القرار. وعشان كده انا حسيت انه this conversation بالذات ان انتوا طلبتوها هي مهمة قوي ان احنا نتكلم فيها، لان ساعات بنبقى محتاجين حد برانا هو اللي يقول لنا حاجة، او يقول لنا حاجات يمكن احنا already عارفينها في عقلنا الباطن or whatever. Some part of us knows these things to be true. بس زي لما بنسمع الحاجة من حد برانا, sometimes that's exactly the wake up call that we need in order to hear it بقى really, مش بس في عقلنا الباطن, بس نسمعها on a more surface level, more conscious level وكده. So, how should you know that it is time to get up, pack your things, and leave a toxic relationship or leave a relationship that is no longer serving you? خلي بالكم انه مش دايما العلاقة اللي نمشي منها لازم تكون toxic. هو بس احنا بقينا بنرمي الكلمة دي كتير قوي. ممكن بس هي تكون علاقة مش نافعة أو is not suitable for us في المرحلة اللي احنا فيها, or is not suitable for whatever reason. What are some signs that we can all agree on إن احنا لازم نمشي؟ أول حاجة, the first sign is that you feel unseen or unloved or unwanted by your partner. أنا مش عارفة أقول لكم أنا كم مرة كنت بقول لماي اكس واحنا متجوزين في نص ما احنا يعني ابقى فعلا متضايقه واجي اواجهه واصارحه واقول له I feel extremely unloved and unwanted and unseen by you, and I would verbalize اقول له مشكلتي هي ان انا حاسه 1 2 3 وقد ايه. هو دي كانت حاجه بالنسبه له that doesn't register at all. كانت حاجه بالعكس, انا مش هنسى فيه مره لما قلت له كده هو اتريق عليا اللي هو قال لي oh yeah you feel unloved and seen and wanted. not only did he not see me or want me or hear me or أي حاجة, هو كمان لما أنا واجهته بقى أنا حاسة بإيه هو اتريق عليا. طبعا مش كل الكيسز هي بالإكستريم ده, بس whenever you feel like you're unwanted, unloved or unseen by your partner, this is a giant red flag. This is a giant like إيه فرملة, محتاجين نفرمل لأنه your romantic relationship is the most intimate relationship you're ever going to be in, especially if it leads to marriage. This is the most يعني أقرب علاقة هنكون فيها في حياتنا, إن احنا نحس إن احنا we're unloved or unwanted or unseen by our partner. هيخلي إنه الnature بتاع العلاقة دي is extremely lonely for you, and that's what I personally went through. I went through the lowest days of my life in this marriage. مع the idea of a marriage or a relationship is that now you have a partner, you have someone that you do life with. But if you feel unwanted, unseen or unloved, it turns into the loneliest feeling حتى لو انتوا مع بعض في الأوضة طول الوقت. Of course this does not mean إنه the second you feel unloved or unwanted or unseen you pack your things and leave. لازم يكون في conversations, لازم يكون في مواجهة إنه أوكي أنا حاسة الحاجات المعينة دي, I will communicate how I'm feeling with my partner. Hopefully in a healthy relationship both partners will be willing to listen to the other person. دي أول حاجة. وتاني حاجة they will care. They will not only be willing to listen, بس هيبقى فارق لهم إنهم يغيروا من نفسهم أو يغيروا من تصرفاتهم, لأنه الواقع هو إن إحنا بني آدمين, فممكن يبقى مثلا في ظروف صعبة في الشغل, في ظروف صعبة في أي حاجة تخليني مش عارفة أهتم بالبارتنر بتاعي. بس once إن البارتنر بتاعي verbalized إن هو حاسس إن أنا مش مهتمية بيه, دوري ان انا اسمع واهتم واحاول ابذل مجهود ان انا اهتم بيه, لانه the assumption is that there is a lot of love there and something worth fighting for and struggling for. You only leave if you feel these things and communicate them and find that when you communicate these things they are not being heard. والشخص اللي قدامنا for whatever reason, whether it's ego or pride or just unwillingness إن هو يشتغل على نفسه أو هي تشتغل على نفسها, that is when you leave. بس مش انه انا حسيت بحاجة فمشيت، لا، لازم يبقى في communication. And this applies to all the other points we're going to talk about. So that's the first point. The second point is you feel unstimulated mentally or emotionally or أي حاجة. لأنه a good relationship should always stimulate you, should always be sparking حاجة في مخك أو في مخك إنك تكوني أحسن. دايما العلاقة الهيلثي هي العلاقة اللي اتنين فيها بيحبوا بعض قوي وليهم مساحة عند بعض إن هما يشجعوا بعض، إن هما يبقوا أحسن. ولو أنا شايفة إن البارتنر بتاعي مثلا مقصر في حاجة أو ممكن يبقى أحسن في حاجة أو كده، إن أنا أقوله فهو يسمع مني ويحس إن هو عايز يبقى أحسن. I want to be in a relationship. يعني looking back at my previous relationship and actually most of my previous relationships يعني يمكن في علاقة واحدة بس اللي دخلتها ما كانتش فيها الموضوع ده، بس بقية العلاقات كلهم ما كنتش ببقى حاسة بأي challenge من الناحية التانية إن أنا أحسن من نفسي أو أغير من نفسي. We should always be feeling like our partnership with our partners, علاقتنا بالsignificant other ده هي علاقة بناءة، علاقة بتخليني as an individual أبقى أحسن. once إن أنا ابتديت أحس إنه في زي laziness من البارتنر بتاعي، معناها إنه هو مش مركز معايا، مش عايزني أبقى أحسن أو مش قادر يركز. again that's when we communicate and hopefully يعني I feel like one really positive thing that we can do before we make the decision to leave is maybe introduce date nights more and more into our relationship where بنقعد وزي we analyze، بنحكي لبعض احنا فين في حياتنا دلوقتي وحاسين بايه وحاسين ان احنا عايزين نتحسن في ايه وكده. and maybe use that as the barometer. شوفوا البارتنر بتاعكو بيأيدكو بيسupports you بيعمل ايه علشان يحسنكو اكتر. once you feel unstimulated ده معناها ان هي علاقة مش بتكبر. علاقة في رأيي العلاقة اللي مش بتكبرني هي علاقة هتهدمني. مفيش حاجة اسمها ان علاقة هتخليني زي ما انا، يا اما العلاقة هتكبرني وتشالنج مي ان انا بقى احسن وتشاور على الحاجات اللي انا محتاجة اتحسن فيها، يا اما العلاقة دي هتشدني لورا. I don't believe that there's gonna be a neutral. So you have to be very aware. كنت مرة بكلم مع حد من أصحابي برضو وقال لي حاجة فرقت معايا ورنت معايا وخلاص من ساعتها الجملة دي لازقة معايا. هي قال لي إنه إحنا دايما بنتكلم على إنه في العلاقة 1 plus 1 equals 2. بس what if 1 plus 1 no longer equal 2? What if we made sure that 1 plus 1 equals 11? طبعا mathematically this makes no sense، بس الشرح بتاعها هو انه لما واحد وواحدة اي اتنين يبقوا مع بعض يقرروا ان هما هيكونوا partners في الحياة، التوتال بتاع حياتهم مع بعض مفروض ما يطلعش 2، مفروض يطلع 11. مفروض انه our union makes us both so much better and so much stronger that everything becomes richer because of the relationship. If you feel unstimulated, that's when you should have a conversation. If that doesn't work, that's a sign that you should leave because you deserve to be challenged so that you can become better. تالت حاجة, if you don't feel excited to spend time with your partner or if simply being around them feels like work. في أواخر علاقتي يعني في أواخر علاقتي مع my ex-husband كانت the very idea بتاعت ان احنا نبقى مع بعض في اي حاجة. يعني احنا كنا مفروض ان احنا شغالين على مثلا هديكوا example ان احنا بنخلص البيت بتاعنا. احنا كنا قاعدين في بيت متأجر و we were working on تشطيب البيت اللي هو our forever home. وكنا بقى مفروض ان احنا متوقع مننا ننزل بقى نروح السلاب ومحجوب والحاجات دي كلها ونجيب الحاجات بتاعة البيت والعفش وكده. وده بالنسبة لمعظم الكابلز اللي انا عرفتهم في حياتي بيبقى phase exciting قوي قوي علشان احنا بنشتغل مع بعض ناحية our forever home والبيت اللي احنا هنعيش فيه وكل الكلام ده. بس انا the very idea بتاعت ان انا وهو ننزل مع بعض، يعني كنا مثلا بنبقى بنتغدى وكده ببقى حاسه كفايه قوي ان احنا اتغدينا مع بعض. the idea ان احنا كمان بعديها محتاجين ننزل ونروح ونعمل مشاوير ونقضي وقت مع بعض وكده، كنت بتجنن، كنت ببقى حاسه اللي هو لا انا خلاص انا مش قادره اقضي وقت معاك تاني، بليز هروح الاوضه اقعد لوحدي whatever. كانت النتيجه ان احنا طبعا ما خلصناش البيت، طلقنا قبل ما نخلص البيت وكل حاجه. بس فعلا the idea of spending time with him was so draining, so sapping of my energy that I couldn't anymore. والفكرة بقى ان انا كنت حاسة الاحساس ده من قبل ما اتجوز اصلا. And that's the thing. Before you get married, especially, if you feel like spending time with that person is boring or is not exciting, you don't feel like you look forward لوقتكم مع بعض, then this is a giant sign ان انتوا تمشوا. I believe that if anything, your feelings towards spending time with your partner should be nothing short of pure excitement. إنه you would rather be with that person doing nothing than not be with that person at all. That is the standard that I go for. هو ده بالظبط اللي أنا I'm striving for. الشخص ده مفروض أبقى بجد بنبسط معاه بطريقة غير طبيعية، وببقى براحتي، وببقى بعمل conversations تحفة معاه وكده، لدرجة إنه I would prefer spending time with him حتى لو احنا مش هنعمل أي حاجة عن إن أنا أبقى لوحدي. فonce إن أنا حسيت إنه spending time with that person feels like work, or that I don't feel excited, I don't enjoy spending my time with that person, I should up and leave. آخر حاجة خالص هي if you feel like you are being abused in any way, shape and form. Now this I think is the most important point, which is why I left it to the very end. We, I think, are now in a generation where we throw around the term abuse very, very, very loosely. And before we throw that term, we need to make sure that we actually are being abused. And we should constantly be reflecting على نفسنا برضو تصرفاتنا في العلاقة, so that we make sure that we are not من غير قصدنا أو بقصدنا abusing our partners برضو. I think there has to be تقل على تصرفات، مش بس التصرفات اللي أنا متوقعة أستقبلها من البارتنر بتاعي، بس there should also be a lot of attention paid للتصرفات اللي أنا بطلعها وإيه اللي البارتنر بتاعي بيستقبله. So when it comes to abuse, I feel like so often the term is now abused. The term abuse is very abused, where certain people who are not actually abused use that term. It's very loose. Before you decide that you are being abused, make sure that you actually are. And the way that you can do that is go speak to a therapist, speak to a professional, or اتكلموا مع حد انتوا بتثقوا قوي قوي في رأيه، لأن ساعات بيبقى الشخص الثيرد بارتي اللي بره العلاقة دي ليه وجهة نظر، أو هو بيبقى قادر يبقى هو يعني في distance ما بين الشخص ده وما بين حياتك، فيقدر ان هو يديلك input يعني على whether or not you're being abused. So there are many forms of abuse. There is physical abuse, and I think this is the most obvious of them all. And then there's emotional abuse. In my opinion, the second one is so much harder to detect, especially if you're inside the relationship. If you are being emotionally abused inside the relationship, صعب قوي ان احنا identify oh this is emotional abuse. But let's tackle the first one first. Physical abuse. I want to say, I did a little bit of research on this, and physical abuse is not only ضرب أو whatever. لأنه في كذا حاجة. أولا ممكن الشخص إن هو if he's being abused emotionally, or if that person is being abused in another way, ممكن الضرب ده يكون self defense. طبعا ده topic كبير قوي مش هتكلم عليه يعني. بس physical abuse can also feel like you no longer have the rights to your own physical space. فمش شرط ان الشخص يكون بيضربك او بيضربك، ممكن الشخص ده يكون بيحبسك او بيحبسك، ممكن الشخص ده يكون بيكتفك بس مش بيضربك. whatever it is, that is physical abuse, and obviously do not stand for it. If that person holds you جامد بزيادة, is forceful in any kind of way, is limiting of your physical space, you can't get up and leave whenever you want to get up and leave, كل الحاجات دي, that is physical abuse. And then there's emotional abuse. This is manipulation. This is إن حد ده يبقى بيكذب عليك، إن حد ده يبقى مش واضح وصريح معاك، إن الحد ده يكون بيستخدم كلامك ضدك، بيخلي إنه أنت أو أنتي مش بتعرفوا إن أنتوا تتكلموا براحتكم لأن بتخافوا الكلام ده هيتاخد عليكم إزاي بعد كده. لا, emotional abuse is a whole array of things, and I highly strongly suggest that you read into that and watch videos about that وكده عشان so that you're aware, عشان to make sure that you are not being abused in any way, shape or form. If you are being abused, you up and leave. أنا بالنسبة لي حاجة كان نفسي دي تتقلي من وانا مصاحبة الأكس بتاعي، وطبعا وانا متجوزاه، انه first of all it's okay to defend yourself if you feel like you're being abused, whatever that self-defense looks like. It is okay. If the person in front of you is the person who prompted this, if the person is the person who triggered the situation and is abusing you بأي طريقة, you defend yourself. Whether that is you defend yourself against physical abuse or physical restraint, or you defend yourself against emotional abuse by not giving into the person's ego and maybe completely removing yourself from the situation altogether. أنا مشكلتي ودي بتهيألي مشكلة ناس كتيرة إن أنا كنت invested، فكنت بنفعل I don't allow myself to just up and leave a situation whenever I could. لا, أنا في مواقف كنت ممكن أقوم وامشي منها، بس أنا عشان أنا invested فأنا دلوقتي مستفزة، فأنا دلوقتي هفضل أبقى موجودة ومتواجدة في مكان where I feel very emotionally manipulated, emotionally abused وكل ده. Remove yourself from the situation that is toxic, that is abusive, because you should not ever tolerate someone else's horrible behavior. You are responsible for your own freedom. You can make the decision to leave. Let's recap. أول حاجة, if you feel unseen, unloved, or unwanted by your partner, you leave. If you feel unstimulated, or if you feel like the total of your relationship is 1 + 1 equals 2 instead of 1 + 1 equals 11, you leave. تالت حاجة, if you don't feel excited to spend time with your partner, or if simply being around them feels like work, up and leave. رابع حاجة, if you feel like you're being abused in any way, shape or form, up and leave. طبعا في مليون ألف red flag تاني وفي مليون ألف حاجة تانية ممكن نتكلم عنها. There's no way I'm gonna talk about all these things for so many reasons. أولهم إن أنا I'm not a therapist ولا أي حاجة. This is purely from my own personal experience. رأيي الشخصي من الحاجات اللي أنا عديت بيها يعني. But I'm not a professional, and also every person's unique situation is unique. It's very individual. But these are things عامة we should all be looking for, and we should all be able to identify in order to leave a bad situation, in order to leave a bad relationship. The sad reality is that very few of us are willing to take responsibility for our actions. Very few of us are willing to look back at our behavior in previous relationships or in the relationship that we're in and actually take responsibility and say, oh, أنا غلطت في الموقف ده. I should have done something differently. I should have blah, blah, blah. And I think we all need to be self-reflective. We all need to spend a lot more time understanding how we're feeling and why we're feeling the way that we're feeling, so that we can know if it's time to leave or if the situation is worth fighting for. It all takes self-awareness. It all takes the ability to verbalize how we're feeling عشان الشخص اللي قدامنا يفهم وبعدين نشوف بقى هنتصرف ازاي. From the deepest parts of my heart, I pray that if you are in a bad relationship, that you find the strength to leave. And then I also pray that if you're in a bad season of a good relationship, that you would find a way out of that season and that you'd go back to a good relationship. Because in my opinion, romantic relationships are so valuable and are so important. And when they are done right, they are so worth it. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Being Allowed podcast. Thank you so much for being here. If you guys are in support of this podcast, and if you in general like the content that is put out every Tuesday, please don't forget to like and share and subscribe. And if you'd like a journaling prompt exclusively in a 2-minute episode every Thursday, then become an official subscriber. Click on the link that says support the show in the show notes below to support the show and then receive a weekly journaling prompt. Thank you so much again for being here, and I'll see you again next time.